It started with a dress. It wasn't just any dress. It was the kind of dress that makes people stare, jaws drop, and minds wander to places they shouldn't. I remember the moment clearly because it was the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew about my marriage. At first, I didn't mind when Rachel told me she'd be attending a party without me. I was slammed with work that weekend, and she deserved to unwind. But when I saw the dress she chose, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It was green, backless, with a plunging neckline that screamed for attention. A dress like that wasn't just a fashion statement, it was an invitation. I didn't want to come off as controlling. I knew the rules of marriage. Don't be the guy who dictates what his wife can or can't wear. But this felt different. It wasn't about jealousy, it was about respect. We were a married couple, not just two people dating casually. I told her gently, "Rachel, maybe you could wear something else. You look beautiful, but this dress, it's a bit much, don't you think?" She looked at me with a mischievous grin and replied, "Oh, come on, Mike, it's just a dress. Don't be so old-fashioned." I tried not to make a big deal out of it, but I could feel the conversation slipping through my fingers. She dismissed my concern as if I was overreacting, like I was some insecure teenager afraid of a little attention. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just about the dress. Something deeper was going on, something I hadn't seen until that moment. I let it go, thinking I was being too paranoid. But the unease stayed with me, clawing at the back of my mind as the night approached. When she left for the party, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. One of those absent-minded pecks that feels more like an obligation than affection, and said, "Don't wait up." And with that, she walked out the door, the green dress swaying behind her like a signal flare. I stayed up that night, despite her warning. Couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts racing in every direction. What kind of party was she attending? Who would she meet there? Why did she seem so eager to go without me? Every question felt like a knife to the gut. I checked my phone every hour, waiting for some sign she was coming home. But there was nothing. No texts, no calls. Just silence. When the sun finally crept through the windows, Rachel still hadn't come back. It was 8 a.m. when she finally walked through the door, her makeup smudged, her hair messy, and her heels dangling from her hand. She looked at me with that same mischievous grin from the night before, as if she knew exactly how I'd spent my night and reveled in it. "Didn't mean to stay out so late," she said casually, throwing her shoes onto the floor. "You know how these things go." I didn't, and that was the problem. We didn't talk about it after that. I wanted to ask her what had happened, but I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. Whatever had gone on at that party wasn't just a harmless night out. Something had shifted between us, and I felt it in every cold glance and dismissive shrug she gave me in the following days. I spent weeks pretending everything was fine, convincing myself that I was reading too much into it. But deep down, I knew. I knew our marriage was already dead. It was just waiting for someone to bury it. And when I tried to bring it up, to talk through my doubts and fears, she dismissed me again. "Mike, you're being ridiculous. It was just a party." But it wasn't just a party. It was the moment I realized I'd lost her. I finally reached my breaking point a month later. I couldn't keep pretending. I packed my things and left without saying a word. There was no dramatic confrontation, no screaming or crying, just silence. I walked away from the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, cutting off all contact, blocking her on every platform, and erasing her from my life. And for 6 years, I stayed true to that decision. I rebuilt myself from the ground up. New job, new friends, new routines. Anything to avoid the memories of the life I'd left behind. I never looked back. I refused to. But then, out of nowhere, she showed up. 6 years later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I heard a knock at my door. And when I opened it, there she was, Rachel, standing on my doorstep, her eyes full of regret and desperation. In her arms was a little girl, no older than 5, with dark green eyes that looked way too familiar. "I need to talk to you, Mike," she said softly, her voice trembling. And just like that, the life I'd left behind came crashing back down on me. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at her. Rachel, the woman I hadn't seen or spoken to in 6 long years, stood right there, holding a child in her arms. I couldn't process what was happening. It was like the world tilted on its axis. throwing everything I thought I knew into chaos. She looked older, her once carefree expression replaced by exhaustion and something that resembled guilt. But it wasn't her that rattled me the most. It was the little girl clinging to her side, her green eyes wide and curious, the same shade as the dress Rachel had worn that night. "What do you want, Rachel?" My voice came out colder than I intended, but I couldn't help it. All the old wounds I thought I'd buried were suddenly ripped open. She shifted uneasily, bouncing the girl in her arms as if that would somehow make everything feel less awkward. "Can I come in, please? I need to explain." I stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, pretend this moment wasn't happening. But another part, the part that still demanded answers, wouldn't let me walk away again. I stepped aside, letting her in with a sigh. Rachel entered slowly, her eyes darting around the house, taking in the space I'd rebuilt without her. It was neat, clean, and untouched by any memories of her. She looked down at the child, brushing her hair away from her face. "This is Lily," she said softly. The little girl gave me a shy smile, but I couldn't bring myself to return it. I felt trapped in a nightmare, unable to reconcile the image of this child with the woman who had destroyed my life. "Why are you here, Rachel?" I asked again, more firmly this time. She sat down on the edge of the couch, balancing Lily on her lap. "I know I have no right to show up like this, but I had nowhere else to go." I crossed my arms, standing rigidly by the door. "What do you want from me?" She lowered her gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need help, Mike. I've made mistakes." That was the understatement of the century. I stared at her, trying to understand the twisted logic that had led her here, after all these years. "And what exactly do you expect me to do about it? You walked out of my life, remember? You made your choice." Rachel swallowed hard, glancing down at Lily, who was now playing with a loose thread on her sweater. "I didn't think I'd ever have to ask you for anything again. But things didn't turn out the way I thought they would." There it was, the vague, guilt-laden statement I had been waiting for. "What things? What happened to you, Rachel?" She looked up at me, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I used to love. "After you left, I thought I was free. I thought I was finally doing what I wanted with my life." She paused, her voice breaking. "But everything fell apart. The people I thought cared about me disappeared the moment things got tough. And now, I have nothing. No job, no home, and a daughter to take care of." The anger I had buried for years boiled to the surface. "So, you decided to come back to me? After everything?" Rachel shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "It's not like that, Mike. I know I hurt you. I know I can never make it right. But I'm desperate. I didn't know where else to go." I stared at her, feeling a mixture of anger and pity swirling inside me. I wanted to tell her to leave, to walk out the door and never come back. But then my eyes landed on Lily, the innocent child caught in the middle of this mess. And that's when it hit me. The timeline, the party, the way Rachel's life spiraled afterward. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Lily?" I said slowly, my voice trembling. "Is she mine?" Rachel's face crumpled, and she let out a sob she had clearly been holding in for years. "I don't know, Mike. I wish I had an answer for you. But it's possible." The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. I had never imagined anything like this. 6 years of silence, and now I was faced with the possibility that I had a daughter I never knew existed. Part of me wanted to rage, to yell, to demand an explanation for how she could have kept this from me. But another part, a quieter, more tired part, just wanted the truth. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice cracking. Rachel wiped her eyes, struggling to keep it together. "I was ashamed. I didn't know how to face you. And then, it just became harder and harder to reach out. Every time I thought about calling, I convinced myself it was too late." I sank into the armchair across from her, my mind spinning. I had spent the past 6 years believing Rachel was nothing more than a painful chapter in my life, closed and forgotten. Now that chapter was wide open, with more questions than answers. Lily looked up at me with those big green eyes, and I felt something shift inside me. I didn't know if she was my daughter, but the possibility was enough to make me reconsider everything. "What do you want from me, Rachel?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. She took a deep breath, as if the weight of the world was resting on her shoulders. I want a second chance. Not for us, I know that's impossible. But for Lily. She deserves better than the life I've given her. The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had once fallen in love with. Not the party girl in the green dress, but the woman who had dreams and hopes, just like me. I leaned back in the chair, running a hand through my hair. I need time to think, Rachel. This isn't something I can decide overnight. She nodded, clutching Lily closer to her. I understand. Thank you, Mike. That's all I can ask. As I watched them leave, a strange sense of calm washed over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was no longer running from my past. Instead, I was standing at the crossroads of a future I never saw coming, and I had no idea where it would lead. The moment the door closed behind Rachel and Lily, I stood frozen, as if the walls around me had started to close in. 6 years of carefully constructed distance and emotional walls were crumbling in an instant. The anger I'd felt all those years was still there, bubbling beneath the surface, but now it was tangled up with something new. A flicker of responsibility, curiosity, and even fear. If Lily was mine, what kind of man would I be to walk away from her? I spent the rest of that day pacing my house, trying to untangle the mess in my head. Every time I thought about Rachel showing up at my door with Lily, my mind spun in circles. I had questions, so many questions, but I wasn't sure I even wanted the answers. I was exhausted from carrying the bitterness and betrayal around for so long. But now I had no choice but to confront it all head-on. By nightfall, I finally collapsed onto the couch, feeling like I'd run a mental marathon. I knew I couldn't just pretend this didn't happen. I needed clarity, and the only way I was going to get it was to meet Rachel again. The next morning, I found myself dialing a number I never thought I'd dial again. It was strange seeing her name back in my call history. Rachel, the woman I thought I'd erased from my life, now back like a ghost demanding unfinished business. She answered after a couple of rings, her voice cautious but hopeful. Mike, she said softly. We need to meet, I replied, trying to keep my tone even. Just the two of us. No Lily. There was a pause on the other end, and I could feel her relief through the phone. Okay. When? Tomorrow. I'll text you the place. I hung up before she could say anything else. There was no point in small talk or catching up. This was about getting answers, nothing more. The next day, we met at a small coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. When I walked in, Rachel was already seated, nursing a cup of tea, her eyes scanning the door nervously. When she saw me, she gave a weak smile, but I didn't return it. I took the chair across from her, the tension between us thick and suffocating. Thank you for meeting me, she said, fiddling with her cup. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Cut to the chase, Rachel. I want the truth. No more dodging, no more half answers. I need to know everything. She nodded, taking a deep breath. I owe you that much. And so the floodgates opened. She told me everything. After I left, she spiraled. She started hanging out with the same crowd that encouraged her to wear that dress, to go to those parties, to live recklessly. The night of the party had been the turning point, just like I'd suspected. She admitted to drinking too much, flirting too much, things spiraled, and before she knew it, she had made mistakes she couldn't take back. And Lily? I asked, my voice tight. Rachel looked down, her hands trembling. I found out I was pregnant a few months after you left. I didn't know if she was yours or someone else's. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The possibility that Lily could be someone else's child had haunted her, just like it was haunting me now. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, struggling to keep my anger in check. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I was scared, Mike. I didn't want to drag you back into my mess. And as the years went on, I convinced myself that it was better this way, that you deserved to move on. I clenched my fists, trying to suppress the rage building inside me. You had no right to make that decision for me. I know, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know, and I'm sorry. I sat back, running a hand over my face. This was a nightmare I never signed up for. So what now? I asked bitterly. You want me to play dad after all this time? Rachel shook her head. No, Mike. I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want to. But I need help. I can't do this alone anymore. Her vulnerability took me off guard. This wasn't the same arrogant, carefree woman I'd walked away from years ago. She was broken, struggling, and, most surprisingly, she seemed genuinely remorseful. I looked at her, my mind still reeling from everything she just told me. We need to know the truth, Rachel. I can't move forward without knowing if Lily is mine. Rachel wiped her eyes and nodded. I know. I'll do whatever it takes. We can get a paternity test. If you want. I let out a long, heavy breath. Yeah, I want that. The conversation ended there. We both knew that nothing more could be said until we had the results. As I stood to leave, Rachel looked up at me, her expression a strange mix of hope and fear. Thank you, Mike, for at least hearing me out. I gave a curt nod and left without another word. The next few days were a blur. We arranged the paternity test, and I went through the motions like a robot, trying not to think too much about what the results might say. But at night, when the world was quiet and there was nothing to distract me, my thoughts consumed me. What if Lily was mine? What if I'd missed 5 years of my daughter's life because of Rachel's lies? Could I forgive her for that? Could I be the father Lily needed, even after everything that had happened? And then there was the other possibility, the one that kept me awake at night. What if Lily wasn't mine? What would that mean for me? For her? Would I still be able to walk away knowing the little girl with the green eyes wasn't mine to claim? The weight of uncertainty was unbearable. But there was nothing to do except wait. Finally, the day arrived. The test results were ready. I stared at the envelope in my hands, feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Rachel was sitting across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Lily was with a babysitter. This moment was just for us. Open it, Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. With trembling hands, I tore open the envelope and pulled out the paper inside. My eyes scanned the words, searching for the answer that would change everything. And then I saw it. 99.9% probability of paternity. Lily was mine. The air was knocked out of my lungs, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief, anger, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite place. My daughter. Lily was my daughter. Rachel watched me closely, her expression unreadable. Mike, she whispered. I looked up at her, my mind still reeling. She's mine, I said, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. Rachel let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Thank you for giving her a chance. I didn't respond. Couldn't. My world had just shifted on its axis, and I had no idea what to do next. All I knew was that everything had changed. The reality hit me like a tidal wave. Lily was mine. 5 years of her life had slipped through my fingers. Time I'd never get back. I sat there, numb, staring at the paternity test in my hand, struggling to process what it meant. How do you go from being a man with a simple, predictable life to a father, overnight? Rachel sat quietly across from me, tears still glistening in her eyes, but I couldn't look at her for too long. Every time I did, all I saw was the betrayal. 5 years. 5 years she had kept my daughter a secret from me. I couldn't decide what hurt more, the loss of those years or the fact that she made that decision without me. What now? I finally muttered, breaking the silence that stretched between us like a canyon. Rachel wiped her eyes, trying to pull herself together. I don't know, Mike. I didn't come here expecting miracles. I just knew you deserved to know. And Lily deserves better than what I can give her on my own. Her words were heavy, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in the facade Rachel had always worn so well. She wasn't the same reckless woman in the green dress. She was tired, worn down by life, and desperately trying to make things right in the only way she knew how. Still, it didn't make the situation any easier for me. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. You want me to be a father just like that? After everything? Rachel shook her head. I'm not asking for that. Not yet. I just need your help, Mike. I can't do this alone anymore. I felt a strange sense of déjà vu years ago. I had loved this woman with everything I had. I would have done anything for her. And now, after all the time, all the pain, she was asking me for a second chance. Not for us, but for Lily. And I knew deep down that I couldn't turn away, not from my own daughter. "I'll be there for her," I said slowly, the words feeling heavy in my mouth. "But don't think for a second that this fixes what you did." Rachel nodded, her face etched with guilt. "I don't expect it to." The next few weeks were surreal. Suddenly, my life was filled with things I'd never imagined. Calls from Rachel about Lily's school, playdates, and doctor's appointments. I was trying to wrap my head around being a father while balancing my resentment toward Rachel, which bubbled beneath the surface like a ticking bomb. Every time I saw Lily's face, it was like a punch to the gut. She was mine, and yet I had missed everything. Her first words, her first steps, her birthdays. I'd never get those moments back, and that thought haunted me day and night. Despite the whirlwind of emotions, I found myself drawn to Lily in ways I couldn't explain. She was sweet, smart, and curious about the world around her. And the way she looked at me, like I was her hero, even though I had just entered her life, melted something inside me. I hadn't expected to care about her so quickly, but it was impossible not to. She had a way of making me forget, even for a moment, how broken everything was. Rachel, on the other hand, was walking on eggshells around me. We kept things civil for Lily's sake, but the tension between us was always there, simmering just below the surface. I could see that she was trying to make amends, trying to build some kind of co-parenting relationship with me. But the past was a heavy burden, and neither of us knew how to carry it without falling apart. One evening, after dropping Lily off at Rachel's apartment, I found myself lingering at the door longer than usual. Rachel looked up from where she stood, surprised by my hesitation. "Mike, everything okay?" she asked cautiously. I crossed my arms, staring down at the worn carpet beneath my feet. "There's something I need to know, Rachel, and I want the truth this time." Her expression tightened, but she nodded. "Okay, the night of the party. What really happened?" I asked, my voice low but firm. Rachel looked away, guilt flickering across her face. "Mike, it's not going to change anything." "Maybe not," I replied. "But I need to know. No more lies." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "That night, I was stupid. I drank too much, I flirted with people I shouldn't have. One thing led to another, and—" She trailed off, her voice cracking. "I made mistakes, Mike. I thought I was free to do whatever I wanted. I thought you would never leave me, no matter what. But I was wrong." Her honesty stung, but at least it was the truth. And as much as I wanted to lash out, to punish her for the years she stole from me, I knew that anger wouldn't help anyone. Not me, not Lily, and certainly not Rachel. "Do you regret it?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "Every single day." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to believe her, to accept her apology and move on. But another part of me, the part that had spent 6 years building walls around my heart, wasn't ready to forgive. "We'll never be what we were," I said finally, my voice heavy with sadness. "But for Lily's sake, I'll do my best to make this work." Rachel gave me a small, grateful smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's all I can ask." The days that followed were a blur of new routines and cautious attempts at co-parenting. It wasn't easy, but somehow we managed. Lily was the glue that held everything together, the one bright spot in an otherwise messy situation. And despite the rocky start, I found myself slowly getting used to the idea of being a father. But the past has a way of creeping up on you when you least expect it. One night, just as I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could work out, I received a phone call that would change everything. It was Rachel. Her voice was frantic, laced with panic. "Mike, you need to come over. Now." My heart sank. "What's going on?" "It's Lily," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She's asking questions. About you. About us. And I don't know how to answer them." I felt a lump form in my throat. The questions I had been dreading were finally catching up to me. Lily wanted to know the truth, and I had no idea how to tell her. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, I said, grabbing my keys. As I hung up the phone and rushed out the door, one thing became painfully clear. this was only the beginning. The past wasn't done with me yet, and neither was Rachel. And somehow, I had to find a way to navigate the mess we had made, without losing the only thing that mattered now. My daughter. When I arrived at Rachel's apartment, my heart was pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was about to walk into, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. As soon as Rachel opened the door, I could see the worry etched across her face. Her hair was disheveled, and she looked like she hadn't slept. "She's in her room," Rachel whispered, stepping aside to let me in. "She's been asking questions for hours. I've tried to answer, but—" She shook her head, biting her lip. "She wants to hear it from you." I swallowed hard, bracing myself. "What exactly has she been asking?" Rachel sighed, running a hand through her hair. "She's starting to notice things, like how you only just came into her life. She asked why she hasn't seen you before. She's a smart kid, Mike." I told her some things, but I didn't want to lie to her. I nodded, my chest tightening. I appreciated that Rachel was trying to be honest with Lily, but it still left me with the hardest job. Telling a 5-year-old why her father hadn't been around. I took a deep breath, then walked down the narrow hallway to Lily's room. I knocked softly on the door, and a small voice from inside said, "Come in." When I opened the door, Lily was sitting cross-legged on her bed, hugging a stuffed bear. Her green eyes, those eyes that mirrored mine, looked up at me with curiosity and confusion. "Hey, kiddo," I said, forcing a smile. "Can I sit with you?" She nodded, scooting over to make room. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands resting awkwardly in my lap. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then Lily broke the silence. "Mommy said you're my daddy?" she whispered, her little voice filled with uncertainty. I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I nodded. "Yeah, I am." "Why didn't I know you before?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Were you hiding?" Her innocent question felt like a punch to the gut. I wished I could give her a simple answer, something that would make sense to a 5-year-old. But there was no easy way to explain the years we had lost. "No, sweetheart, I wasn't hiding," I said softly. "I didn't know about you. If I had, I would have been with you from the very beginning." Lily looked down at her bear, her little fingers tugging at its ears. "Why didn't Mommy tell you?" I hesitated, glancing toward the doorway, where Rachel stood silently, watching us. "That's complicated," I said carefully. "But the important thing is, I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Lily's eyes searched mine, as if trying to figure out if she could trust me. "Promise?" she whispered. "Promise," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She gave me a small, hesitant smile, and without warning, she crawled into my lap, wrapping her tiny arms around my neck. I froze for a moment, overwhelmed by the sudden rush of emotions. Then I hugged her back, holding her tightly, as if that simple act could make up for all the lost time. The next few weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. Rachel and I worked out a co-parenting schedule that allowed me to spend as much time with Lily as possible. I started taking her to the park, helping her with school projects, and reading her bedtime stories over the phone when she stayed with Rachel. Slowly but surely, I was building a relationship with my daughter. But as things began to settle, the tension between Rachel and me grew more complicated. We were trying to make peace for Lily's sake, but the unresolved feelings between us hung in the air like a storm cloud, waiting to break. One night, after I dropped Lily off at Rachel's apartment, I lingered at the door again. Rachel noticed and gave me a curious look. "Something on your mind?" she asked softly. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to say what had been weighing on me for weeks. "Why did you wear that dress, Rachel?" She blinked, caught off guard by the question. "What?" "The night of the party," I continued, my voice low. "Why did you wear that dress, even when I asked you not to?" Rachel looked away, her face pale. "I thought it didn't matter. I thought—" She trailed off, searching for the right words. "I wanted to feel free, Mike. I was tired of feeling like I had to fit into a box, like I had to be perfect all the time." Her answer hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so much time resenting her for that night, but I had never stopped to think about how she might have felt. Trapped, restless, searching for something she couldn't quite name. "I never wanted you to feel trapped," I whispered, the weight of regret pressing down on me. I just wanted us to be enough for each other. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, we stood there, caught in the tangled mess of our past. Then she reached out, her hand brushing mine. I know, Mike, and I'm sorry for everything. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. As the months went by, we fell into a new rhythm. One that wasn't quite family, but wasn't just co-parenting, either. We were something in between, something fragile but real. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was moving forward, not just running from the past. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. One day, while Rachel and I were picking Lily up from school together, a man approached us. A man I recognized all too well. It was Marcus, the guy Rachel had been involved with after the party. The man who could have been Lily's father. He smirked as he sauntered over, his eyes flicking between Rachel and me. Well, look who's playing happy family, he sneered. Didn't think I'd see the day. Rachel stiffened beside me, her grip tightening on Lily's hand. What do you want, Marcus? She snapped. He shrugged, his smile smug. Just wanted to say hi. See how things turned out. I felt my fists clench at my sides, every muscle in my body screaming to knock that smirk off his face. But I held back for Lily's sake. Get lost, Marcus, I said through gritted teeth. You're not welcome here. He chuckled, holding up his hands in mock surrender. Easy, man. Just saying hi. With one last smug grin, he walked away, leaving a trail of tension in his wake. Rachel let out a shaky breath, her face pale. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice filled with shame. I placed a hand on her shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. We're not going to let him ruin this, I said firmly. Not now, not ever. Rachel nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude and something else. Something that looked a lot like hope. And as I stood there, holding my daughter's hand and standing beside the woman I had once loved, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we had a chance to build something new, something better. After the encounter with Marcus, a strange heaviness settled between Rachel and me. It was like his presence dragged all the old ghosts back to the surface, reminding us of everything we had tried to bury. But we didn't talk about it, at least not right away. For Lily's sake, we kept moving forward, pretending that things were fine. I could tell Rachel was rattled, though, and to be honest, so was I. The days turned into weeks, and Lily's presence was becoming the anchor I never knew I needed. I found myself rearranging my life to fit her into it. Her smile, her laughter, the way she called me Dad with absolute certainty. Those moments made the chaos worth it. But beneath all the joy of bonding with my daughter, a nagging fear remained. Would Marcus find a way to creep back into our lives? Was he going to become a problem? That fear gnawed at me. I knew Rachel's past with Marcus was complicated, messy, and unfinished. And while she tried to assure me that he was just a bad memory, I could see the tension in her shoulders every time his name came up. One night, after putting Lily to bed, I sat Rachel down at the kitchen table. The air was thick with unspoken words, but I needed clarity. Rachel, I began, we need to talk about Marcus. She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. What do you want to know? Everything, I said simply. I need to know if he's going to be a problem. For you, for Lily, for us. Rachel's eyes filled with guilt and frustration. I told you, Mike, it was a mistake. He was never supposed to mean anything. After that party, he was just there. And when things with you fell apart, I guess I leaned on him more than I should have. Her voice cracked, and she shook her head. He doesn't care about Lily. He never has. I told him early on that there was a chance she wasn't his, and he vanished. Now that the test proves she's yours, I don't know why he even showed up. That was the part that didn't sit right with me. If Marcus didn't care about Lily before, why now? What was he playing at? Do you think he'll come back? I asked, watching her closely. Rachel shrugged, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. I don't know, Mike. He's unpredictable. But if he does, we'll deal with it. Together. Her words sounded sincere, but I could see the fear lurking in her eyes. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something unexpected. The urge to protect her. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the pain, part of me still cared about Rachel. Or maybe it was just the desire to keep Lily safe. Either way, I knew I couldn't let Marcus mess with the fragile peace we had built. A few days later, that peace shattered. Started with a phone call. I was in the middle of a work meeting when my phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced down and saw Rachel's name on the screen. My heart sank. She never called me during the day unless it was something urgent. I stepped out of the meeting, my pulse racing as I answered. Rachel? What's going on? Her voice was frantic, filled with fear. Mike, he was at Lily's school. I froze. What? Marcus? She whispered, her breath coming in sharp bursts. He showed up at the school. The teachers didn't know who he was, and he told them he was Lily's father. Rage boiled in my veins, hotter than anything I'd felt in years. Did he talk to her? I demanded, barely able to keep my voice steady. No, Rachel assured me quickly. The teachers called me right away. I went to the school and got Lily before he could get anywhere near her. But, Mike, I'm scared. I clenched my jaw, the muscles in my neck tightening. This wasn't just a coincidence. Marcus was trying to stir things up, and I wasn't going to let him. I'll handle this, I said firmly. You and Lily stay home. Don't go anywhere until I figure this out. Rachel's voice cracked with relief. Thank you, Mike. That night, after making sure Rachel and Lily were safe at home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached out to a friend from the past. Will was an old buddy from my college days, someone who had gone into private security after graduation. We hadn't talked much in recent years, but I knew if anyone could help me deal with Marcus, it was him. When Will answered the phone, his familiar gruff voice put me at ease. Mike? Damn, it's been a while. Yeah, it has, I said, cutting to the chase. Listen, I need your help. It's about my kid. That got his attention. I'm listening. I told Will everything, about Rachel, Lily, Marcus, and the mess that was unfolding. Will didn't interrupt, but I could hear the tension building in his voice as I spoke. So, you want me to keep an eye on this guy? Will asked when I finished. Yeah, I confirmed. I need to know what he's up to, where he's going, who he's talking to. If he comes near my daughter again. I trailed off, my voice thick with anger. Will chuckled darkly. I get it. I'll take care of it. Give me a few days, and I'll get back to you with what I find. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Thanks, Will. I owe you. Just keep that kid safe, he replied. That's all that matters. The next few days were a blur of tension and waiting. I kept my phone within reach at all times, waiting for Will's update. I spent every free moment with Lily, trying to shield her from the storm that was brewing around us. Rachel and I grew closer during that time, united by the shared goal of keeping our daughter safe. But beneath the surface, the unresolved tension between us simmered, waiting for a spark to ignite it. Then one evening Will called. I've got something, he said without preamble. Marcus isn't just hanging around for no reason. He's in deep with some bad people owing money all over town. My guess? He's trying to use you and Rachel to dig himself out of a hole. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. What kind of trouble? Gambling debts, Will replied grimly. Big ones. If he's sniffing around you and Rachel, it's probably because he thinks there's something to gain, either money or leverage. I clenched my fist, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. What do you suggest? Cut him off fast and hard, Will advised. Don't give him an inch. If he shows up again, let me know. I've got some guys who can pay him a visit if needed. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thanks, Will. I appreciate it. Anytime, Mike. Just keep that family of yours safe. As I hung up the phone, a cold sense of determination settled over me. Marcus wasn't going to mess with my family. Not now, not ever. I had spent too many years running from the past, but this time I was ready to fight. And I wasn't going to lose. The moment I hung up with Will, I knew there was no going back. Marcus wasn't just a ghost from the past. He was a threat, one that needed to be dealt with quickly and decisively. I wasn't going to let him disrupt the fragile life I was building with Lily. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let him hurt Rachel again, no matter how complicated my feelings toward her were. The next morning, I made a decision. It was time to confront Marcus head-on. I didn't tell Rachel what I was planning. She was already on edge, and I didn't want her panicking. I just told her to keep Lily close and stay put for the day. She gave me a wary look, sensing I had something up my sleeve, but she didn't push. "Be careful, Mike," she whispered as I headed out the door. "I always am," I replied, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Tracking Marcus down wasn't difficult. Will had sent me a detailed list of places Marcus frequented: shady bars, gambling spots, and cheap motels. I found him at one of the bars near the edge of town, nursing a beer and chatting up the bartender like he didn't have a care in the world. The sight of him made my blood boil. There he was, acting like he hadn't just tried to weasel his way back into Rachel and Lily's lives. Acting like he hadn't almost blown up everything I'd worked so hard to rebuild. I didn't wait for an invitation. I strode across the bar, grabbed the back of his chair, and spun it around so he was facing me. His smirk faltered the moment he saw who it was. "Well, if it isn't the doting dad," he sneered, but I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. "Let's take a walk," I growled. Marcus tried to laugh it off, but I grabbed him by the collar and yanked him to his feet. I said, "Let's take a walk. Now." The bartender gave us a nervous glance but didn't intervene. This wasn't the kind of place where people got involved in other people's business. Marcus stumbled along behind me as I dragged him outside into the alley. I shoved him hard against the wall, my hands still fisted in his shirt. "You've got one chance to explain yourself," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Why the hell are you sniffing around Lily? What do you want?" Marcus coughed, trying to squirm out of my grip. "Relax, man. It's not what you think. Then start talking," I snapped, slamming him against the wall again for good measure. Marcus groaned, finally realizing I wasn't in the mood for games. "Look, I just needed a way out. Okay? Things are bad, real bad. I thought if I could convince Rachel to help me out. Maybe what?" I growled. "Maybe she'd give you money? Maybe you'd threaten her until she gave in." He shook his head frantically. "No, man, it wasn't like that. I thought if I made her think I still cared, maybe I could work something out." My stomach churned with disgust. "You're pathetic." Marcus grimaced, but he didn't argue. He knew I was right. "Listen," he pleaded. "I swear, I won't go near her or the kid again. Just let me walk away, man. I'll disappear." I leaned in closer, my voice a low, dangerous whisper. "If I see you near them again, if you so much as think about Rachel or Lily, I won't just make you disappear. Do you understand?" Marcus swallowed hard, nodding quickly. Yeah, I got it. I swear." I gave him one final shove for good measure, then stepped back. "Get lost. And don't come back." Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He staggered down the alley, casting one last fearful glance over his shoulder before disappearing into the night. I watched him go, my fists still clenched at my sides. It felt good to confront him, to take control of the situation for once. But I knew this wasn't over. Not entirely. Marcus was like a cockroach. He'd scurry away for now, but I had no doubt he'd crawl back if he ever saw an opening. I just had to make sure that opening never came. When I got back to Rachel's apartment, she was waiting anxiously by the door. The moment she saw me, relief flooded her face. "Is it done?" she whispered. I nodded. "It's done. He won't bother you or Lily again." Rachel let out a shaky breath, her shoulders sagging with relief. "Thank you, Mike. I don't know what I would have done without you." I shrugged, trying to play it off. "I'm just doing what any father would." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, there was something unspoken between us. Something that felt a lot like gratitude, and maybe even hope. The following weeks were calmer. Marcus stayed out of sight, and slowly, Rachel and I began to settle into a new normal. I started spending more time at her apartment. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. For Lily's sake, I told myself. But deep down, I knew there was more to it than that. Rachel and I still had a long way to go. There were scars that ran deep, and trust wouldn't come easily. But every day we took small steps forward. We weren't just two people co-parenting anymore. We were building something, however fragile it might be. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching Lily play with her toys, Rachel leaned her head against my shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." I didn't say anything, but I rested my hand over hers, giving it a gentle squeeze. And in that quiet moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we had a chance at something new. Not the life we had before, but something better, something real. For a while, things started to feel almost normal. The tension that had once filled the air between Rachel and me slowly began to fade. We weren't back to what we used to be. Hell, I didn't even know if that was possible, but we had found a rhythm. Most of our energy went into Lily. She was thriving, soaking up every bit of attention from both of us like a sponge. I started coming over more, staying for dinners, and sometimes even crashing on the couch if Lily begged me to stay for a movie night. There were moments when it felt like we were a family again. The three of us laughing together in ways I never thought we'd be able to after everything that happened. But every time things started to feel easy, there was always that lingering fear. A nagging thought in the back of my mind that this peace was temporary. Just the calm before the next storm. The storm came on a Wednesday evening. I had just finished work when my phone buzzed. It was Rachel, and I could hear the panic in her voice before she even said hello. "Mike, Marcus is back." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean he's back? I thought we were done with him." "So did I," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "He showed up at my door an hour ago. He said if we don't help him, he's going to make trouble for us. He knows things, Mike. Things I never wanted to tell you." My stomach twisted. "What things, Rachel?" She hesitated for a moment, and in that pause, I felt the weight of every lie, every secret she had kept from me. "He knows the truth about what happened the night of the party, and he's threatening to tell Lily, unless we give him money." The room around me started to spin. "What truth, Rachel? What the hell are you talking about?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and when Rachel finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I slept with him that night, Mike, after you left. That's why I was so scared to tell you about Lily. I didn't know who her father was." The air left my lungs in one sharp exhale. Even though I had suspected it deep down, hearing her say the words felt like being stabbed in the heart. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. "And you were just going to let me find out like this? I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I was ashamed, and I thought if I kept quiet, it would go away." I let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through my hair. "Well, it's not going away, Rachel. It's here, right on our doorstep." That night, I drove over to Rachel's apartment, the anger simmering inside me like a volcano about to erupt. When she opened the door, her eyes were red from crying, and Lily was asleep in her room, blissfully unaware of the chaos brewing just outside her door. "We need to stop Marcus before this gets worse," I said, pacing the small living room. "If he thinks he can blackmail us, he won't stop until he bleeds us dry." Rachel nodded, her face pale. "I don't have the money he's asking for, Mike, and even if I did, I wouldn't give it to him." "Good," I said through gritted teeth. "Because we're not paying him a damn cent." Rachel looked at me, her eyes filled with fear. "What are we going to do, Mike?" I sat down on the couch, running a hand over my face. "We have to outsmart him. We need to make him think that if he comes near us again, he'll regret it." Rachel swallowed hard. "Do you think we can scare him off?" I gave her a grim smile. "We're damn well going to try." The plan came together quickly. I called Will again, and this time I didn't ask for surveillance. I asked for action. Will was more than happy to oblige. 2 days later, Marcus showed up at Rachel's apartment again, grinning smugly as if he had already won. But this time he wasn't greeted by Rachel or me. He was greeted by 2 of Will's guys. Big, intimidating men with years of security experience and no patience for scumbags like Marcus. They escorted him out of the building, making it very clear that if he ever came near Rachel or Lily again, he wouldn't just be dealing with me. He'd be dealing with people far more dangerous. The message was loud and clear. Marcus didn't come back. In the days that followed, Rachel and I finally found some semblance of peace. The specter of Marcus was gone, and with it, the weight of all the secrets and lies that had hung between us. We weren't perfect, far from it, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving forward instead of running in circles. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching Lily play with her toys, Rachel turned to me with a hesitant smile. "Thank you, Mike," she said softly. For not giving up on us. I looked at her, and for the first time I felt a strange sense of closure. The anger, the bitterness, they were still there, but they didn't control me anymore. I'm not doing this for us, I said quietly. I'm doing it for her. Rachel nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I know, but I'm still grateful. I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. We're going to be okay, Rachel. Maybe not perfect, but okay. And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. For the first time in years, life started to feel manageable. Marcus was gone, and Rachel and I were working together better than I'd ever imagined. There were still moments of tension, old wounds that would never fully heal, but we both knew that if we wanted Lily to have a good life, we had to keep moving forward. We spent weekends together at parks, hosted movie nights, and even began celebrating small victories, like Lily's first school recital, as a team. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. And after the storm we had been through, peace was enough. But peace is a funny thing. It never lasts as long as you hope it will. One morning, I received a letter in the mail. It was official looking, with no return address. Curious, I ripped it open. Inside was a court summons. My heart sank as I scanned the words. Marcus O'Connor has filed for partial custody of Lily Walker. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Marcus, the same scumbag who had tried to blackmail Rachel and disrupt our lives, was now coming for my daughter. My hands shook as I clutched the paper, rage bubbling to the surface. I called Rachel immediately. Marcus is filing for custody, I said, my voice tight with disbelief. What the hell is going on? Rachel was silent for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice trembled with fear. I thought he was done. I thought. Well, he's not, I snapped, cutting her off. He's coming for us. And this time it's serious. I could hear the panic in her voice. Mike, what are we going to do? We can't let him take her. We just can't. We won't, I said firmly, though I had no idea how we were going to stop him. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Marcus's lawyer was ruthless, digging up every piece of dirt they could find on Rachel's past. They painted her as unstable and irresponsible, using her mistakes against her in ways that made my blood boil. I knew she had made bad choices. Hell, we both had. But Marcus's lawyers twisted everything to make it look like she was unfit to be a mother. I hired the best lawyer I could afford, but even with a solid case, I couldn't shake the fear that the court might take Marcus's side. He was manipulative, cunning, and knew exactly how to present himself as the victim. And worst of all, he seemed to enjoy every second of it. Rachel and I attended hearing after hearing, each one more draining than the last. We sat through hours of testimony, character witnesses, and cross-examinations that left Rachel in tears more than once. But through it all, I stayed by her side. I had made a promise to protect Lily, and I intended to keep it, no matter what it cost me. The final hearing arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was unbearable. Marcus sat smugly at his table, his lawyer whispering something in his ear that made him grin. Rachel sat beside me, clutching my hand so tightly I thought she might break my fingers. When the judge finally spoke, the world seemed to stand still. After reviewing the evidence and testimony provided, I find that Marcus O'Connor's petition for custody is denied. Custody of Lily Walker will remain with her mother, Rachel Walker, with full parental rights granted to Michael Walker as the child's legal father. The words hit me like a wave of relief. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, and Rachel broke into quiet sobs beside me. We had won. Lily was safe. Marcus's face twisted with fury as the judge banged the gavel. He stood abruptly, muttering curses under his breath, but his lawyer pulled him back, warning him not to make a scene. As Marcus stormed out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my chest. It was over. The nightmare was finally over. Outside the courthouse, Rachel and I stood together, the cool breeze brushing against our faces. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to relax. Rachel turned to me, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Mike, for everything. I gave her a small smile. We did this together. She hesitated for a moment, then threw her arms around me in a tight hug. I froze, surprised by the sudden gesture, but then I hugged her back. Felt good, like maybe, just maybe, we had finally found our way back to something real. The weeks that followed were quiet and calm. Marcus had vanished, and the threat of him disrupting our lives was gone for good. Rachel and I continued to co-parent Lily, and with every passing day, it felt less like a duty and more like a family. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching Lily play with her toys, Rachel leaned her head against my shoulder. "Do you ever think about us?" she asked softly. Her question caught me off guard, but I didn't pull away. "Yeah," I admitted. "Sometimes." Rachel sighed, her voice filled with a mix of regret and hope. "Do you think we could ever be more than this? More than just parents?" I didn't know how to answer that. The wounds of the past were still there, and I wasn't sure if they would ever fully heal. But as I looked down at Lily, our daughter, the one thing we had done right, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, we deserved another chance. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think we owe it to Lily to try." Rachel smiled through her tears and rested her head against my shoulder once more. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were exactly where we were meant to be. Months passed, and life slowly began to feel like it was on solid ground. Rachel and I found a rhythm, balancing the ups and downs of co-parenting, healing old wounds, and inching toward something that felt like peace. We weren't rushing into anything, but the unspoken question hung between us. Could we really start over? More importantly, Lily was happy. Her laughter filled the apartment, and every time she called me Dad, it reminded me of how far we'd come. She didn't know all the messy details of the past, only that she had two parents who loved her, and that, in the end, was all that mattered. It was a cool autumn afternoon when the final chapter of this saga began. I had just picked Lily up from school, and she was chatting happily about her day as we walked toward the apartment. "Dad, can we make pizza tonight?" she asked, tugging on my hand. "Of course," I said, ruffling her hair. "Anything for you, kiddo." We were almost to the door when I spotted someone standing by the apartment building's entrance. My heart stopped. It was Marcus. He looked disheveled, his once cocky demeanor replaced by desperation. His eyes were wild, darting between me and Lily. "Mike, please, just hear me out," he said, raising his hands in surrender. I pulled Lily behind me, my body instinctively blocking her from him. "You've got 10 seconds, Marcus," I growled, "and then you get the hell out of here." Marcus swallowed hard, glancing around nervously. "I screwed up. I owe people money, bad people. If I don't pay them soon—" He trailed off, the fear in his eyes telling me all I needed to know. "That's not my problem," I said coldly. "You brought this on yourself." "Please, Mike," he begged, his voice cracking. "Just a loan, enough to get them off my back. I swear, I'll disappear after that. I'll never bother you again." I stared at him, disgusted by the man standing before me. He had been a threat, a liar, and a coward, and now he was nothing more than a desperate man at the end of his rope. "No," I said firmly. "You've already taken too much from me. You're on your own." Marcus's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought he might lash out. But then he seemed to deflate, the fight draining out of him. Without another word, he turned and staggered away, disappearing into the cold evening. I exhaled, feeling a strange sense of finality. Marcus was gone, for good this time, and with him the last remnants of the chaos he had brought into our lives. That night, Rachel and I sat together on the couch, watching Lily build a tower of blocks on the living room floor. The apartment was warm and filled with a sense of quiet contentment. "We made it," Rachel whispered, her head resting on my shoulder. I nodded, wrapping my arm around her. "Yeah, we did." For the first time in years, I felt at peace. The storms of the past had finally passed, and the future, whatever it held, didn't seem so daunting anymore. Rachel looked up at me, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper. "Do you think maybe we could try again? Not just for Lily, but for us?" I smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift from my shoulders. "Yeah," I said softly. "I think we can." Rachel's smile was radiant, and as she leaned in to kiss me, I realized that the second chance I never thought I wanted was now the only thing that mattered. In the end, life isn't about erasing the mistakes. It's about learning from them, moving forward, and building something new. And that's exactly what we were going to do, together.